Hello, everyone. I think we're good to start now. So yeah, thanks for tuning in for today's session. We're super excited to have Vishank Kumar today. He's a Delhi-based motion designer. And if you already follow him on IG, he's been creating some really beautiful and playful code-based animations and has worked with brands like Adidas, Budweiser, and Cred, to name a few. In today's session, he'll be talking a little bit more about why coding knowledge can help you level up your animation skills. And he will be taking some Q&A breathers in between topics during his presentation. So please feel free to turn your mics on and ask any questions via that or chat. And we are giving a little bit of time at the end of the session as well for questions. So if you miss something, please stick around for that too. For anyone who's joining us for the first time, Motion Sickness is a growing community of motion designers from India with the goal to connect and bring to spotlight many of the creative talent that's around the country. And our current endeavors include reposting motion work on Instagram, building a small community to discuss all things motion on Discord, and sharing insightful speaker sessions on our YouTube. So this session will also be recorded. So in case anyone misses out or can't attend the entirety of it, we will have it on YouTube about a week from now. So stick around for that too. And if you'd like to join or be a part of any of the things that Motion Sickness is doing, we'll be sharing all of our links on the chat here. And yeah, I think that's about it. I'll just share that. Vishank, over to you.
Thanks, Nikhil. Hello, guys. Thank you all for joining and welcome to the talk. My name is Vishank, and today we will be talking about systemizing and pushing motion design with the help of a little bit of code and programming, techniques. Before we begin, a couple of things. Firstly, I wanted to thank Aishwarya, Nikhil, and anyone else at Motion Sickness for doing this, for setting this up, for inviting me, and in general for creating this platform. It's very important that we have platforms like these, especially in a very niche field as ours. I think this is useful for the beginners and professionals alike. It gives the beginners a lot of good direction, good advice, and the professionals, they also benefit from places like these. In the sense that they get recognition for their work, they also get to share the knowledge that they have. So yeah, really, really important that we have places like these in our field. I mean, there are the other design practices. They already have because they're already established for a while. They already have places like these existing for a long time, and it's about time that motion design also had these things. So thanks, Nikhil. Thanks, Aishwarya. I know it's a lot of effort doing this. And I also wanted to thank the previous speakers that have taken the time out to share the knowledge. So yeah, that was one. The second thing, I think Nikhil already mentioned that, but I just wanted to mention it again. This is going to be a technical topic. This is going to be something which is which talks a lot about like the behind the scenes stuff, how stuff is done. And it is perfectly understandable that there will be like questions when I'm talking about some of the stuff, which is especially for people who have not that much experience with doing code-based animations, or using After Effects, the expression system in After Effects in general, right? So for that, I have made sure that after I do each breakdown, I sort of have around like 4 to 5 minutes to take up questions. So please feel free to post your questions in the chat. I have also mentioned the slide numbers on the top right of each slide. So I'll request you all to please mention the slide numbers as well in the questions, or as Nikhil said, you can just unmute and ask. That's also good. So yeah, I'm ready when you are. Shall I begin, Nikhil?
Yeah, we're good.
All right, let me share my screen. I don't see I think my option for sharing screen has been grayed out. Can you check, Nikhil?
Sorry, let me just check on that 1 second. sorry about that. We're having a technical glitch. I think it should be visible now.
Yeah. Let me do that.
Awesome. Cool.
All right. I hope it is visible now. Okay.
Yep. All good.
Yeah. All right. So my presentation is called Beyond Keyframes. I'm going to be talking about systemizing and pushing motion design with code. I have in the next slide I have broken down what is the what are the things that I'm going to be talking about, and I'm just going to run them by really quickly. I'll be introducing myself very quickly. Be setting up context for the entire presentation after that. The third section is called a convincing exercise. That's a convincing exercise essentially for me to sort of try and convince everyone who is seeing this to take up learning programming in some form, at least the basics stuff, or at least some of the basic concepts that it offers. uh, so that is going to be the longest. That is where I encourage you to ask questions. um, the fourth section is called how to get started, where I'll be just talking about if you are interested after all in doing these things, then how do you get started with learning something like this. Then I will share some resources, and in the end we also have some time to take up further questions. Right. So quickly going through the introduction. I am a motion designer based in New Delhi. I've been in the industry for about 6 years now. I've been designing and directing motion design projects for web advertising and social. I started my journey back in 2017 at this UI design studio called Lollipop. I was there for about 6 months before I moved on to Animal, where I worked as an art director for animation, and I was there for about 4 years before switching to Disney Plus Hotstar, where I've been working since 2022 as their senior motion designer. Now, to set up some context for the slides to follow, there is, I know like a lot of you must be thinking, why go through the hassle of learning something entirely new? Aren't there already enough tools for motion designers, that a motion designer is expected to learn? Yes, there are, absolutely. And that is a fair question. So why learn something like this, right? I have the answer phased out in a couple of points. So the first, point that I have is you should learn something like this to elevate your craft and to push your work beyond what is possible with keyframe animation. um, I know there are times when when you want to do something, and you are because you're so used to doing that, doing that animation or whatever it is that you're working on in a specific tool, in a specific setup. uh, Most of the the ideas that you get are are very much dependent on the limitations of that tool, right? But the work that you do and the ideas that you have, they will go beyond like a specific tool that you're used to. So it doesn't matter what tool you use, it has limitations, and being able to execute exactly what you have in mind at a functional level, that's really great. It gives you the freedom from using one specific tool for a task, and that alone, I think, is a very strong point if you are considering learning something like this, because that enables you to do that. And yeah, I mean, we are so used to working on a specific tool, but I'd argue that we should not be just limiting ourselves to the tools that we use. We are motion designers, and we should be able to create motion with almost anything that allows us to do so, right? And this creating something from scratch, from being able to instruct the computer to do that, that's a very a very big plus point that you can add to your skill set. So that is one. The other point that I had was to be future ready. Now, obviously, like in in times like these, we can't have a discussion about the design's future, about the future of how, like, where our industry is headed, without mentioning that AI is coming. After artificial intelligence is there, like, you can't deny that, right? And while I won't go into like the depths of why, like, if whether it is good or bad, or whether you should fear it or not, or whether you should be concerned at all about like it taking up your jobs, I think one thing is for sure, that we need to coexist with this. And it is sort of the same thing as like years ago, when hand animators, people who used to animate stuff by hand, they had to coexist with digital tools, right? When the digital revolution came and personal computing became a thing, and they had to also they had to witness a shift like this, and they did that. So this is a similar shift. It's a bigger shift for sure, but there is no other way other than coexisting with it, right? And yeah, in a future like that, I think the more number of skills that you have, the more number of things that you do, that you can do, I think the more are the chances that you can combine those skills and form a niche which is sort of like AI proof, or which can't be replicated by a single AI program. So that gives you the edge also, like if you learn something like this. The next point that I have is sort of a general point. It's a good to have skill in general, actually, because we are surrounded by so many digital products, and I mean, we have a smart counterpart for almost everything that we use nowadays. Like anything that used to be, analog, that is now it has a digital, digital counterpart. And even the tools that we work on, they are digital as well. So these all of these devices, they are instructed to perform like certain tasks using a language that is different from the language that we use for communication, right? And my point is that if so much of our lives are controlled by digital products, then one might argue that having an understanding of how they communicate, that might be a useful skill, right? If you know how to instruct a computer to do a certain task, and have a functional level understanding of how they work, that's a very useful skill to have. So that is like a general point, actually. Now, the next, for setting up more context, I will talk about the history of the primary industry tool that we use for motion design, that is After Effects. After Effects, actually, it started as a compositing tool. And in fact, like many of the, many of the names that you see in After Effects for things like composition, alpha matte, luma matte, stuff like that, all of those, they actually stem from that compositing background, which is the thing that it was actually primarily built for. As it progressed, more and more motion design capabilities were added, and the product, like sort of pivoted from being a compositing software to a motion graphic heavy tool. Currently, it has, in my opinion, the combination of motion graphic capabilities along with some tools for compositing, and that makes it a very unique product, actually. But again, like, because it was not thought of as a motion design tool, and that was sort of like added later, that has its own demerits, that newer tools like Cavalry and Rive, and there are many motion tools actually nowadays which are trying to fill that gap, right? The demerit is that because it was not thought as a motion graphic tool, it obviously has gaps in its workflow, and you know the new tools that you see, they are sort of stripped of any compositing or capabilities like that. And the result is that those tools are lighter, those tools perform certain tasks for motion design way better than After Effects has been able to, right? If I give you an example, let's take the example of having like something like a component that is a thing that is that Figma users will be familiar with. Those like the idea of a component is very simple. It's like having an instance of just one element which has like interchangeable properties. While newer tools like Cavalry, they make it like very easy to build components. After Effects, like doing that in After Effects is still very tricky, right? And these are the gaps that I'm talking about. These are the gaps that can be filled, if you know a little bit of programming and like some programming concepts. That's definitely gonna like make your life easier. And yeah, the third point that I will like include for setting up more context is that uh, these basic concepts of programming, like arrays, indices, loops, conditionals, etc., all of these things will help you elsewhere as well. Like it will be helpful in organizing how you work in other tools, or like even if you just want to organize your work in a better way, even for that, it's very useful. Like these concepts are very useful. So it's understandable that if you don't want to like get too much into doing things with code, I'd still argue that like these learning these fundamental basic concepts is going to be like useful for you. Now the section that is going to be a convincing exercise for me, where I'll be talking about like taking some examples of animations and simple rigs which I've done using code, right? I've broken it down into two subsections. The first is in the first section, I'll have, I think, some 3 or 4 examples of rigs in After Effects and Cavalry. And, I'll be breaking them down and just at the functional level of how they're working. Some of these are more detailed than the others, but yeah, I mean, let's actually take a look and see if you have any questions. Again, like I want to mention this again, like I will be going through these examples and I'll be pausing in between, like after I finish doing one of these examples, like taking you through one of these examples. And yeah, in the like the pause that we take, the break that we take in between, I encourage you to ask any questions if you have. And also, like if I am going too fast, please also make sure to just mention that in the chat itself. Right. So the first example that we're going to be talking about is to create a button rig in After Effects. Right. Let's take this button for example. It has, if you see, it has, it is a sort of a rounded rectangle with an icon on the left. There's some text. There's a header text and there is a subtext. Right. The task that you are given is to create, have like 6 variations of these buttons, right? Now all of these have like different sort of layout for the same button that you have on the left. In some of them you already have the header text, in some of them you have the header text with a subtext and with an icon. You have like more variations like these that you are given and that you want to sort of rig and animate, right? Now you are given 2 more color options for this. So along with 3 color variations, the number of buttons that you had earlier, which was 6, now becomes 18 buttons in total, right? And then you're also supposed to include this seek bar on top of some of those buttons. So that includes, like, that increases your scope to be to have 36 buttons that you're supposed to use in that project. Now traditionally, like, what you would do is create 36 compositions like these, go inside each composition, make sure that that is different from the other. There is a variation, there's one single variation in each of these comps. And I don't have to tell you that's a very time consuming process. You are you're stuck with comms after comms, and after a while it just gets out of hand. You will have a very hard time actually controlling where this is going, and what button variation comp has what type of button, right? And surely there is a easier way to do this, or a more, like a structured way to do this, right? Essentially, you have these 6 buttons, and what you want is, you want to have an option where if button 1 is selected, only make button 1's opacity to be 100, and hide everything else. Same for button 2, same for button 3, 4, 5, and 6, right? Essentially, what you want is sort of a list in from which you can select that button. And what that will do is only make that specific instance of the button visible, and it will hide everything else. It will hide all the other layers that you have in that comp, right? That is the basic idea that we have at hand right now to rig this, right? So how do we go about doing that? There is this option called drop down menu control in After Effects. You can find it under effects, expression controls, and drop down menu control. In that, you sort of try to list down all of these variations of that button. If you go to edit, you can add items to that list, and you can name them properly according to the to the things that you have at hand. In my case, I had 6 variations of these buttons which I have added to this list, right? And then let's start writing this very simple line of code, which will enable us to do what we want to do. On the button layer's opacity, let's start adding an expression. Alt click the bit that you see on the screen right now. It's just saying that button selector is this menu, right? It is just, I have just pick whipped this menu, and just it will just automatically take that whole it will create that whole code for for you itself. So you just have to say that this line is just saying that button selector is this menu, right? Now, what you want to do is specify that by default, we want this button's opacity, this layer's opacity, to be 0. And then what you want to do is, what you want to use is this simple concept in programming called a conditional. A conditional is something where it looks at something, it checks if that condition is valid, and if that condition is valid, it does something. If it's not valid, it does not, it stops doing that, right? It's a very simple concept which will be more clear when I go through the next steps. You simply write that if button selector is set to 1, which is the first option, then make this layer's opacity to be 100, else set it to be 0, right? So you are simply instructing it to do that, to just take a look at this button selector, see if it is at 1, change its opacity to 100 if it is at 1, else change its opacity to 0, right? A very simple 4-line code that you have at your hand right now. Then you just say that opacity value is this layer's opacity. You do that for all the other layers, all the other button variations that you have, which is just copy this code and just paste that in the other layers that you have, and just change this button selector equals 1 to 2, 3, 4, 5, corresponding to the the buttons that you have, the variations that you have. And you are able to do something like this, where you just select that item from the menu, and it will only make that particular item visible, right? Now, adding, similar concept, like if you try to add more things like the button's color, if you add the similar concept of conditional of its if statements to color variation, seek bar, and other stuff. I also have seek bar length in this example. You are able to create something like this, where you are able to change the colors, you're able to change the buttons, you're able to toggle the seek bar as well. In this case, the seek bar is only visible for that resume button, because that is the only button that supports the seek bar. So you can specify that as well with a conditional, right? So yeah, I mean, from 36 layers 36 comps that you were supposed to have, you are now down to 4 controls which control all the variations that this button thing can possibly have, right? And I don't have to tell you that that is a more structured approach of doing this. It will save you a lot of time if you go this route, because you spent like just 5 minutes writing this and copying and pasting it to the other layers that you have, and you are able to create something like this, which will otherwise would have taken you hours and hours to do. Now, because you have a comp like this in which you have interchangeable properties, all of these sliders that you see on the screen, you are able to distribute these the same button, the same rig that you have, the same rig that you have created, and you are able to distribute them in whatever comp that you want and create additional controls like these to do so, right? This is this was the whole section on the first example that I had. I'm gonna pause here and I'm gonna see if we have any questions, and I'll try to answer them.
Well, thank you for taking us through that, Vishank. If you all have any questions, can you please drop them in the chat or turn on your microphones and just ask away? If yeah, sure, go ahead, Aishwarya.
Yeah, so I'm completely new to this. So, if you were to animate this, would you use do it like uh, keyframes only, or is there any other kind of?
Is it just me, or I actually wasn't able to hear that properly?
Your voice was breaking. You think you can type it in the chat?
Yeah,
Yeah. I think the great thing about After Effects and like combining these things with After Effects is that you are free to like use any other effect, any other like keyframe animation that you want to do on top of this. This is all just like the example that I'm showing on the screen right now. That is also all of these like all of these variations of these buttons. You can try to animate them with like by using traditional animation like concepts as well, with off scale, opacity, position, all of that stuff, and anything works. So that is the, I think that's a good segue into sort of emphasizing that the how powerful this is, because when you're writing, when you're doing these things with expressions, you can combine them with all the other capabilities that After Effects has, and that gives you sort of like a huge list of possibilities that you can do. The it's basically limitless what you can achieve with combining these two things. So yeah.
Cool. If there are any other questions, drop that in the chat. I think Vishank, we can continue for now.
I think we have another.
Okay, sure. You can go for that.
Yeah, sure. It obviously is better to do it in Figma if you are not planning to animate it. If you want to, use some of the things that only After Effects app offers for animation, then like rigs like these, they become very useful, because although yeah, Figma has some animation capabilities, you can't the kind of stuff that you can do in After Effects uh, with like variations of these buttons distributed on layers. There are tons of like things that you can add on top of this. That I think makes it very useful to have kind of rigs like these in After Effects itself. Does that answer it? Yeah, great. Um, If we don't have anything like any other questions, I can move on.
Yeah, I think let's continue for now,
Yeah,
and we can take up the next set if there are any more questions.
yeah. Right. Um, the next example that I have is to distribute like something on a circular path, right? So basically, what I want to do is take a poster like this that you see on the screen on the left, and try to like place them on the on these points that you see on this circle on the right? Basically something like this. Obviously I want to change the posters. I don't want the same poster to be visible in each iteration, but that is something that we can change later as well. Right now I just want the same poster to be distributed on this on the circle, on the path of a circle, right? Sure, you can do that with hand. Obviously, like you can take these things, you can just change their position. You can draw rulers and like try to do it by hand. Accuracy is going to be one concern, like how accurate these things are when you place them on the circle. The other thing is that if you want to make changes to like the circle's radius, or like it's you want to shrink it or like stretch it, you'll have to again like do that by hand, and that whole process becomes way more time consuming than like it needs to be. So let's try to break it down. Let's try to see like how we can like go about doing something like that, right? uh, the what we are going to use here is sort of this very simple like a very simple line of code which will help us calculate these points on a circle. The angle between these 2 points, let's just say that it is a at the moment. What a is, the value of a, that depends on the number of slices that we have for the circle. In this case there are 12 slices, so we know that the that a circle has 360 degrees in total. We divide 360 by 12 and we get 30. So the value of a for our case is 30, right? Now there is this very simple line of code which will help us like sort of calculate the x and the y coordinates for each of these points. The x of all of the x position of all of these points is going to be calculated by radius of the circle multiplied by sine of the angle a that we calculated in the last step, right? And similarly the y is going to be calculated by radius times cos of that angle, right? Again, like a very simple expression. The good thing about uh, uh, things like doing things like these is that luckily most of the times the math part is already done by someone before, right? This is this is something that is pretty standard actually. You can find similar expressions, similar ways of calculating the x and y position of other paths as well on the internet. In the case of circle, it's a very simple expression. In some other cases, it's slightly more like complicated. In some cases, it's slightly less complicated. But for the example, let's say that this is what we have, right? Now let's try writing this code. In the poster layers position, let's specify the radius of that circle first, right? I'm going with a static radius of 300. We can obviously use a slider here instead of a normal value. But for this example, let's just say that we specify that the radius circle is 300, right? Angle we have already calculated to be 30. I am using this degrees to radians function that is inbuilt in After Effects to convert the value from degrees to radians, because After Effects uses radians, the extended script that the expression system in After Effects uses, that expects these values to be in radians. So this is an inbuilt function, by the way. You can just say that 360 divided by 12 is something that I want to apply to that layer's angle, but I want to convert these from degrees to radians, right? And I'm multiplying this by index because I want to be able to duplicate my poster layer and automatically calculate these angles for each of that index as well. Index, if you're not familiar, it's just saying that the number at which a layer resides on the timeline. So the first layer on the timeline will have an index of 0 because these things start at 0. The second layer will have an index 1. The third layer will have an index 2, so on and so forth. Right? It will make more sense when I go to the next step. Again, we are going to calculate the x and y using the same equation that we had before, and that we just say that x and y is the position of this layer. We have what, 5 lines of code that enabled us to do something like this, where we are able to duplicate the poster, and it will not exactly like fall on the on the points of a circle, on a circular like sort of grid, right? And yeah, I mean, you can obviously use like a slider instead of this 300 number that I have for radius circle. And when you increase or decrease the slider, this radius of this circle is gonna like increase or decrease. So hopefully you can see like how doing something as simple as this, like with just 5 lines of code, you're able to do something which is which is far more easier and less complicated to do by hand, right? This is another section that we had. You can connect all of these properties, obviously, in the last section with sliders and make a system out of it, right? Yeah, I mean, this was this example. If there are any other questions, I can take for this section as well.
Thanks for sharing that. Anyone, again, questions, please feel free to start your mics or drop it in the chat.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. Okay, so in order for this circle to move, you might be seeing that these posters themselves, they are not rotating, only the circle is rotating. And that is happening because what I have done is all of these, the angle that I'm calculating for that layer, right? I am sort of multiplying that angle with a time factor that enables me to do something like when the as the time progresses, this angle keeps increasing for each of these points, right? Each of these points that you see, for example, at this point, the angle of this point is something which is 0. After a point, if you try to multiply this angle with time, this point will be something here, and then this goes there, and then this goes there. So this point sort of like keeps moving on the circle. And basically what is happening with these posters is that they actually are moving on the circle. They are not like nothing is rotating here. The angle of each of these posters is continuously changing with time, and that's why it does not rotate itself, but rather just moves on the circle. Hopefully that makes sense. Great. If there are no other questions, I can move on.
Sure, let's continue.
Yeah. All right. Now, if like we can do this to a circle, there is no reason why we can't do this, with other shapes as well. So this is a slightly more complicated shape called a deltoid. It has a slightly more complicated expression to calculate x and y, and I'm animating the the phase, I think, of this animation, which is allowing me to do something like this. I have a more complicated, like rig for this section, where I am able to, as I said, because you are doing it with code, you are able to rig all of those things, connect all of those properties to sliders, and like create something which is more, it gives you more freedom to animate more of like these properties. So yeah. And if we can create a rig like this for posters, there is no reason why we can't do that for text as well. So this is again the same expression, but applied to a path, and that path is sort of controlling the position of this text using the text on path function that we already have inside After Effects. And yeah, I mean, hopefully you can see like this is a good example of how you can like do some of those things in code and the other stuff in using the traditional things, the traditional options that you have in After Effects. Again, like this is just brushing up the surface. You saw how like the sort of length of code that I had above. It was hardly 4 or 5 lines. And yeah, I mean this is a very powerful technique in general. And yeah, this is how how powerful this is. Hopefully you can create more things like these, touch up like try to like research more about this, and create more cool stuff with this. This is just, as I said, this is just like scratching the surface of what's possible. Now the next section that I have is it has an example in Cavalry, and I'm going to use that example to explain the concept of arrays in programming. Now, just like a quick, just a quick sort of precursor to all of this. For you to be able to follow this properly, you might have to have a basic understanding of the UI in Cavalry. For people who already are aware with Cavalry, they like they will have they should not have any problem following this. But for people who are new to Cavalry, I encourage you to take a look at this later after you have explored how how the UI in Cavalry generally works. So what I will try to do here is, let's take this sort of like a rectangular shape with some text inside it, right? Now this rectangle is supposed to have three things. On the top, we need to have an alphabet from a language like English, Devanagari, Malayalam, etc. In the place of this T that you have, right? On the bottom right, you are supposed to have the language name for the alphabet that appears here, right? And on the left, you are supposed to have the name of the font that is being used to display this character, right? Because English will have a different font, Hindi, Devanagari will have a different font, Malayalam will have a different font, right? In this case, this is, the font that we are using are different for each of these things. So the English letter uses Inter, Devanagari uses Noto Sans Devanagari, Malayalam uses Noto Sans Malayalam, and so on and so forth, right? Now we want to take this, this rectangular shape with this text, and we want to distribute it on a grid like this, right? This is already, like something that if you try to do by hand, it's going to take you some time, right, to do that. But add to this that all of these swatches that you see, all of these rectangles that you see, they are supposed to have different texts on them, right? So some of them will have this Devanagari text written, right? Some of them will have, like the English text. Some of them will have Arabic. Some of them will have Malayalam, Telugu, all the other variations, right? Now, again, doing something like this is very time-consuming process if you do it by hand, right? And even if we do place all of these, by hand, if we need to animate, like all of these things changing, then we are in for a long day. It's needless to say that this will take a lot of time, right? Now, while we can do this with After Effects as well, with the techniques that we discussed in the previous sections, Cavalry, as I mentioned before, is built in a way to handle these situations because of its procedural workflow, right? Let's take a look at how we will be able to do that, right? Now, in the next section, I'm going to introduce, like in the next slides, I'm going to introduce the concept of arrays in programming. An array basically is an empty box, right? Anything that goes inside this box can be stored, and that can be called on later and to be used in your code, right? This can be text, this can be numbers, this can be fonts, this can be videos, SVGs, icons, any type of data basically that you want to store in an array, you can do that, right? Now, let's take a look at the example that we have at hand. In our case, we have this rectangle which has three things which need to change, right? The alphabet that you see on the top, that has to change for each language. The name of the typeface that you see on the bottom left, that has to change for each language variation. And the name of the language that you see on the bottom right, that also has to change according to the changing alphabets, right? Now, we are going to use the concept of arrays to sort of, like list down the variations of all of the alphabets, all of the fonts, and all of the languages that we have. So basically, the language alphabets will have something like this, where you have, like the text that goes in for that language stored in, different alphabets like these inside this array. Same for the language names. The corresponding language names will have English for this, Devanagari for this, Malayalam for this, Telugu, Tamil, Arabic, right? And we will have another array which will have corresponding fonts for all of these languages. So English will be in Inter, Devanagari will be in Noto Devanagari, Malayalam will be in Noto Malayalam, so on and so forth. Right? Now, next we are going to see how do we, like, we have created this array, fine, great. How do we call these elements? Let's say that from this, from this box, we want to call this section that we have. You want to call the Devanagari alphabet that you have. How do you do that? So for doing that, there is something called an index of an array. It's similar to the index thing that we have in After Effects, where it is just the number that is associated with that with that element. So the first element will have an index of 0, second will have an index of 1, third will have an index of 2, so on and so forth. And if you want to call the first element, you'll say array at 0, that will give you the first element. Array at 1 will give you the second element. Array at 2 will give you the third element, so on and so forth, right? Now, the thing now is that now we have established that how, like, these are the things that we are supposed to like work with, right? Now, as I said before, because Cavalry has been thought of as a procedural motion design tool, it has these functions built inside its UI, right? So you have options called typeface arrays and value arrays and string arrays and asset arrays, all of those things already built inside it, right? If you are familiar with Cavalry, you can just go in and search the term array, and it will list down all of the other variations, all of the variations of the arrays that it offers. In our case, we are going to take, I think, 3 string arrays. String is basically text. It's just a fancier name for text. In our case, we are going to take 3 string arrays and 1 typeface array in which we store the fonts that we are going to use for each of those languages, right? So if we take that rectangle, for example, the language that we see on the bottom right, that can be stored in a string array like this, where the first string is, like language, the second string says English, third says Arabic, fourth says Devanagari, Malayalam, Telugu, Tamil, all of that, right? The second array that we can have is for the font names. Font names, again, corresponding to these values. For English, you'll have Inter, the font Inter. For Arabic, you'll have the font Noto Sans Arabic. For Devanagari, you'll have Noto Sans Devanagari, so on and so forth, right? And hopefully this is making sense, because what we essentially need to do is we have like 3 different lists, and we are picking up corresponding elements from all of those lists and combining them together to form this, right? The third, obviously, section is the top, alphabet that we want to display. And again, like the same concept, the alphabet corresponding to English will be in Inter, and it will have this text. The alphabet in Arabic will have Noto Sans Arabic as its font, and it will be this text, and so on and so forth, right? Now, we combine all of these that we did in the previous, previous few slides, and we combine them with their corresponding fonts using a typeface array. So inter this basically like the difference between this and this is that this is just the names of the font, and this is the fonts themselves. So if you want to display this text in inter, you will connect this with inter, right? If you want to display this text in Noto Sans Arabic, you will like connect this with Noto Sans Arabic. So all of these things combined, that gives you something like this. If you connect it to a sequencer, where you just change the number of, like the travel that you see on the sequencer, and it will give you corresponding, letters on the top, and corresponding, uh, font names and language names on the bottom, right? Where if you have something like this, if you have like a system like this, you can use that to you can use this system to distribute in like, and do animations like these with the duplicators and the other stuff that you have in Cavalry, right? So hopefully you can see how powerful this is. You don't have to do all of these things by hand. Um, i i you know uh, i understand if this was, like slightly more complicated than the other ones, but because it has a GUI, it has a graphical user interface, Cavalry, that Cavalry offers, it's very easy to actually get into this. I have not been able to, like explore too much of Cavalry myself, but even with the short, like, time that I've spent with it, with the tool, it has already, like, proven to be a very, very useful, very, very time saving, like tool for me. Again, I'm gonna pause here and I'll see if I have some. I think we already have two other questions that we had. Abhishek is saying you're using JavaScript. Yeah, for After Effects, yes. After Effects uses a more simplified version of JavaScript called Extend Script. Basically, it's more lenient. You don't have to declare variables. You can just, uh, just name something and call it. You basically just don't have to declare anything, like, as you do traditionally in JavaScript. Uh, there's another question from Tanaya that says, for a beginner, is it easy to start with essential graphics and then further add more code in it? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think all of the rigs that I have done, the example that I showed, that I spoke about above, where we had that button rig, I will use, like the slider controls to rig all of those things, and you can just pick, like those slider controls and add them to the essential graphics panel, and that, like sort of is attached to that comp. So whenever you are using that comp, you have those options with that comp as well. So and yeah, and it is, like easier to start with the essential graphics panel, because it is a great segue into the concept of connecting things from each other, with each other in After Effects. Is it possible to add a additional JavaScript file to run in After Effects directly without adding in the expression section? I am actually not sure about that. I have not explored doing that. So I think that, like that lies in that in the realm of actually scripting, when you make use of the API that After Effects offers, and try to, like build up tools or plugins. I have not done, like that, so I can't comment on it. So yeah, that's that. uh, how does Cavalry compete with AE? What are the differences? Cavalry is really, really great for doing some things which requires the the thing to be procedural, basically. It is still in its early stages, and it is but it's still, like very, very powerful at doing some of these things. It does not have compositing capabilities, which After Effects has, which sort of, is like a downside. But again, like, because it focuses mainly on motion graphics, um, I don't know, like it's not something that can currently replace After Effects, if that is what you're asking. And uh, but um, but yeah, I mean, you should give it a go and try and see. I'll say that it still is in early stages, and with some more, refinements and more, I think, features which they are obviously like continuously adding. it will be a great, like contender to replace After Effects in the future. Could you also do this example in After Effects? Will it be more complicated? It surely will be more complicated because there I think you will need to make all of these lists yourself, which Cavalry just offers you like a UI for it. For example, this that you see, these things that you see right here, all of these things are already, like in the UI form where you can just, like write things directly inside these columns, and they will be, like added to the array. Whereas if you try to do that in After Effects, you'll have to declare all of those things by hand, and that will obviously be more complicated. So yeah, anything else, or should we move on?
Cool. I think we're good for now. Let's continue.
Yeah, yeah. Right. The next section is going to be slightly more complicated, which is why I'm just gonna do like a surface level breakdown of that. Right. Animating or designing using like P5JS or Drawbot or any other programming language is slightly challenging at first, especially for us motion designers who are so used to working on applications with a graphical UI. And it takes a while getting used to this limitation. But with practice, I think you'll get more and more comfortable with these tools. And yeah, I mean, I think that's just a sort of a general statement that I wanted to make before I move on with the next section. As I said, the complicated nature of these projects combined with the absence of a user interface makes it very difficult to do a detailed breakdown of projects, because there are just so many things that you have to do. You have to declare everything using text. So I hope that you'll understand that I won't be able to give you an exact like breakdown of how I have done certain things. But yeah, the following ideas that I have will have an idea level breakdown of some of these animations. Yeah. Right. There is one example that I wanted to include, which is brightness-based animations in P5JS. It's a very, very popular effect. I think many people use it. Uh, I think it will make more sense when I actually show you like what is actually happening in this. This is basically controlled by this black and white animation that I've created in After Effects. What it does basically it is it takes these like brightness values that you have. It takes each of the frame in this animation, all the like PNG sequence. I rendered this animation from After Effects as a PNG sequence, and what the code actually does is it takes a look at each of these PNGs, and it pixelates them first like this, right? And then from that list, it sort of like sees these values, these pixels, and based on the brightness values of these pixels, it is distributing this animation accordingly, right? So every pixel will have a brightness value that ranges from 0 to 255. It will take this animation basically, it will break it down into number of frames, and it will map these frames according to the brightness value that a pixel has. So a pixel with a brightness value of 0 will have this frame being displayed. And because this is constantly changing, this frame also keeps changing, and it seems like like it's animating. That is the basic idea behind this animation. I'm gonna quickly go through how I've done this. Basically, to be able to do this, we have to specify the number of pixels in x and y axis. Then we calculate the pixel width and pixel height using like dividing the entire width of that comp with the number of pixels that we want to have. And then we run a nested loop for x and y. Now, uh, I can go about like explaining how a nested loop works and what it is, but that will like complicate the scope that we have for this presentation. So I'm gonna skip that, and I'm gonna urge you to take a look at that, try to read more about it, try to see more tutorials. I have a list of more resources that you can refer to where you can learn things like these. So I will leave that to you to actually try and figure out how these things work, because explaining this is beyond the scope of this presentation given the time that we have. Right. So now in that nested loop, I am specifying the number of frames that this animation has, and I'm loading this image, all of these images from an array that I've specified before. So similar to the arrays that we had in Cavalry, I'm declaring this array somewhere else, um, in the setup section, in the preload section of this code. And from that array, I am calling each of these functions and sort of looping them with the frame number that we have, right? So after the 150 is done, it goes back to 0 and then starts again. So that's how it's looping. Now, what actually happens in this, how do we get this pixel information, is this using something called this function called dot get, right? What dot get does, it looks at a pixel, and it like tries to get its all the information that that pixel contains, RGB values, brightness values, saturation values, stuff like that, right? And to get the exact location of these pixels, what I'm doing is I'm multiplying the pixel width that we have calculated here with the number in this loop. So the first time the loop runs, it will look at 0. The second time it runs, it will look at 1. So for example, if we wanted to calculate this point, we will say that the rune like the fourth iteration of loop come like multiplied with x will give us this value, and the third iteration of this loop multiplied with y will give us the y value of this, right? This is why I was calculating the x and y position of this pixel, and I'm using that to get like that pixel information using this image dot get function. Now, there's another function called brightness. What it does is it will take the information that image dot that this dot get function gives you, and it will extract the brightness information from that. So this basically stores the brightness value that each of these pixels have, right? Now what I'm doing is for this section where we were supposed to map the brightness value of each pixel with this with the number of frames that we have in this animation, is done by this simple line where I'm just calling the map function. What this map function does is it takes the brightness value as its first parameter. It specifies that the brightness value goes from 0 to 255, and it says that while it is going from 0 to 255, map it so that it goes from 59 to 0, right? Which are because we have 60 frames in our animation in the circle animation that we had, and that's why it is just taking this range, which is from 0 to 55, and mapping it to this range, this new range that we had. And then I am using this again like another array where I have stored that circle animation, and I'm using this b image that we have calculated here to display those images instead of pixels, right? And yeah, then we get something like this where all of these brightness values, they are sort of replaced. All of these pixels are replaced by one, like by some variation of this animation, right? I want to like take a moment here and mention that it's quite understandable if you're having trouble following this, because I'm speeding up the process of how this actually works, right? I just wanted to introduce this concept of of for loops, and while I can't go over it in detail right now, I do encourage you to explore it on your own. And as I said before, we'll cover like where you can learn things like these in the next sections. Yeah.
Vishank, I just really quickly wanted to hop in and say we have about 20 minutes for the 1.5 hour mark. We just crossed the 1 hour mark, so we're good on time, and just wanted to let you know and update you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, I think there are some questions. How did you get exposed and learn this stuff and all this? Is session will be able to, yeah, the session will be available recorded, I think. How I got exposed and learned these things was I actually did this like in phases. Initially, I was just interested in the using expressions in After Effects, and I knew for a fact that expressions use JavaScript as their language. So I started learning JavaScript, and this was way back when I was actually just starting, like learning After Effects. And I did that for a while. Then, there were because I was still learning After Effects, I had more important things to focus on. So I quit doing that. I just had like a basic understanding of how these basic principles worked. And then, like years later, I sort of started doing it again. And then I think I sort of found P5JS. I found processing first. Actually, processing is the Java counterpart of P5JS. That is actually basically an application in which you write code, as opposed to writing, like code in a like a code editor and trying to run it on browser. That basically just runs locally on a software that they provide. Um, so that is how I got introduced to processing, if that is what you're asking. And from there, I found that there is a JavaScript counterpart of processing as well. So I should give that a try, because I already had an experience, some experience with using JavaScript in After Effects. So I thought I should, I might give it a go. And that is how, I sort of stumbled upon doing these things. I think there is another question. Vishal has raised the hand. Do you have a question, Vishal?
Hey Vishal, just drop it in the chat, or you can also start your mic and just talk.
Yeah, Abhishek is saying it will be great if you share the resources. Yeah, I have a section for that as well. I'll give you like a quick rundown, and all the links that I will be mentioning in that section, I'll make sure that I'll drop that in the chat as well.
Vishank, maybe we can continue for now, and Vishal can drop his question on message.
Yeah, sure. All right. There's another animation using a similar technique in processing. Again, like this is going to be, a sort of just an idea level breakdown of how I've done this. As I said, processing is the Java counterpart of P5JS. Actually, processing came first, so P5JS is a JavaScript counterpart of processing. Basically, what we're going to do is take like a frame like this, which I have done in. I can draw this in processing as well, but for the sake of this, like this presentation, let's just say that you can draw something like this using Illustrator or any other design tool that you have. And you want to take the brightness value of these pixels, and then use that to drive some of the animations, or some of the things that you're going to draw, the style that you're going to draw this in, right? So again, like similar concept of nested for loops, where I specify the like number of tiles or pixels in the last section. I calculate the tile width and tile height by doing the same things. I divide the width by the number of tiles. Then in a nested for loop, I do the same things. Actually, I calculate the color using that image.get function, and I calculate the brightness using the brightness function of that C. And then the thing that is different in this example is we are taking this, which is basically a string, and basically is text. This is basically like a set of glyphs that one particular font offers. So this is from this font called, I think Commodore is the font's name, Commodore 64. That offers these glyphs. So I thought it would be a great idea to sort of, distribute these things according to the brightness values of those pixels. The least brightness value will have, like this string in place of that pixel, and the brightest, pixel will be replaced by something like this, which is very bright, right? So yeah, you sort of mention that the density string is this string that we are going to be using. I am combining that with this font that I already mentioned, is Commodore 64. And we sort of, uh, uh, just try to distribute that. Actually, I'm not distributing it based on the brightness, but rather the x value of these pixels. So if you see, I am dividing x. This basically is a modulo function. What it does is it does a division operation here, and it uses remainder of that operation to sort of give us the value. It is very useful. I would love to break this down, but again, I want you to take this up in your own time and try to research on how this works. But basically, what it is doing is it will go through the whole x, the number of things that we have in x, which is the number of tiles, which is 80. It will go through each variation of x. Then it will sort of divide that by density's length. Density is this string, so the number of elements that we have in this string is the length of this string. It will divide that by that, and when it's done, it will come back to zero and do that again. And then when that is done, it will come back to zero and do that again, right? So that way, what it is doing is, if you see these pixels, they start from the least evident sort of glyph that we have, and it goes up in brightness and goes to the more evident glyphs that we have here. And that is exactly what is happening here. It starts with the least one, and it goes till it reaches the most one, and then it does that again, right? Now, again, the same concept of a conditional using like this if and else statement that we use in the first example. If we say that the brightness of each of those pixels is greater than 200, then fill it with this color, else fill it with this color. And that allows us to color this. So basically, if you see here, all of the gray areas in the background, they are less bright than 200. And all of these whiter like things that you see, they are more brighter than more bright than 200, right? So it basically does that. It just takes a look at the code, and it fills the pixels that are less bright than 200 with red, and which are brighter with a a lighter shade of red. So that allows us to do this. um, Again, like add some fancy and complicated noise functions on top, and that is calculating how these pixels are distributed and moving, and that gives you something like this that you can do. So yeah, this is this section. I am gonna be are there any questions? I know this last step, I'm not, I've not broken it down, but yeah, it was like, it is a little more complicated to sort of discuss that, which is why I have left it out of the scope of this presentation.
I think we can continue
Yeah,
for now. We'll take any questions at the end if there are some.
sure, sure. I have some other examples in P5 where which I'm not going to be breaking down. I'm just, I've just been using this tool for a while now. So I've just to show you like the kind of things that you can build with it. This is a rig which I've created where I can, distort the text and, change its color, change the text itself, use more controls. I built more controls to sort of, stretch and do things like these with this. And yeah, I think more stuff which I have again done using P5, which is again like doing these things in After Effects. Even if I knew how to, or if there is a plugin, it gives me the freedom to do these by hand, by just having an idea and just going ahead and doing that with code. So that is why doing things like these are very I just enjoy doing these things a lot. I think some of the examples are already on my Instagram. You can find more examples on my website as well. Right now, let's say that fine, you are convinced that this is something worth learning. So where do you start? Where do you uh, I think there is a question. how do you record the output of the code at different library, or is something built into P5? Yeah, so there are some, there are some functions built into P5 that will export those things as frames. So you can use again like simple for loops to distribute those things. Um, for doing things like for like showing rigs like these, obviously like you'll have to do a screen record, like a screen grab. But if you just wanted to capture this canvas that you see in the background, then yeah, there are other like libraries, like I think there's this library called CC Capture, which lets you do that, that I'm aware of. And yeah, and you can use that to sort of capture what is happening on the. This is basically happening on a browser. So this thing that you see in the background, that and these things that you see on the right, all of these things are happening on Chrome. So either you can screen record the whole thing, or you can just capture the canvas that Chrome offers with a library called CC Capture. Hope that answers that question. Now, yeah, where do you start, right? Now, the first thing that I have that people, tell me when I mention that we should get started uh, learning code-based animations is that it has a very steep curve, and that's a valid, that's a valid point. The absence of a graphical user interface and the presence of math makes it very very difficult for you to get started with doing something like this. But that is why I suggest to start with A's expression system, right? Why? Because it has a simpler language. The expression system, the code system that After Effects uses, it is much simpler in complexity. You can use it with your existing workflow, and you can connect properties to each other using sliders. You can do complicated stuff with that, with just knowing just the basics of code. So I showed you in that in the basic examples that I had for rigging some of the tasks that take too long to do in After Effects. And these were obviously those were very very like simple examples, but there is a lot of things that you can do by combining the interface of After Effects along with the things that you write in code. And I would say that the only limit that you have doing this in After Effects is the amount of RAM that you have on your computer. If like you have the more RAM you have, the more crazy things you can create and preview. um, Again, like I think I answered that in a question as well. But with the essential graphics panel, you can use these controls in other comps as well, because what you can do is you can rig all of these things in on a layer, on a control layer, and then you can drag and drop these properties into the essential graphics panel, and these properties are sort of attached to your comp. So wherever you use that comp, these properties will be visible with that comp as well, and you will be able to change these with each variation of the comp. You can just duplicate the comp, select a different property, and it will display the same comp differently. And that is that gives you a very a very easy way of rigging stuff and doing complicated stuff with this. The third point about why do you need to start it with After Effects is it already has a ton of inbuilt features to support expression based animations. If you alt click on any of these properties and you click on this arrow that you have there, you can go and you can see all of these things have some boilerplate code to make your life easier. All of these things which you have to do by hand, you can just click on these and it will paste a boilerplate code which you can just change by hand. And that is a huge time saver, and it's very easy to do as well. Along with the expression controls, all of these things that you have under the expression controls value in effects. Again, like this is very useful in creating rigs, in creating things that you want to control with sliders. You have slider control, you have point control, which is controlling X and Y position. You have layer controls, which will I think essentially enable you to select a layer. You have 3D point control, angle control, checkbox control, all of these stuff, all of these things are there. So It's had a ton of inbuilt features to support the expression-based animations that you want to do. The second thing, after you have, like you have some experience with After Effects expression system, is what I would suggest is to try to learn JavaScript with P5JS, right? Why P5JS? Because it is very easy to start with. It has a web editor, right? And you can just go to editor.p5js.org and you can just start writing this code. It uses JavaScript, which is the same language used in After Effects. And if you have some experience with doing these things in After Effects, then you can try these things in parallel. You can use P5JS to sort of like build things which have more control, and you can use similar concepts in After Effects as well to make your life easier as a motion designer and to create some other stuff. P5JS is also open source, which is why many users make their sketches available for public use, which means that you can essentially just go to like that web editor, and you can go to a user's profile and you can open all of these projects that they have chosen to make available for public use, and that alone gives you a lot of things to refer to while you're doing something. And yeah, I mean, that is also a great thing to about learning P5JS. Now, fine, you want to learn these things. Where do you actually, what are the resources that I used or I recommend using to learn these things, right? The first thing, if you want to, like get started with expressions in After Effects, uh, there is this book called The Power of Expressions by Franz Lefebvre, which is a great book to like start learning the basics of expression systems. It it starts from the basics and it explains in detail how the expression system works, with examples and structure of how these things are built. So great book. I recommend it very much. I think it is going to be very helpful for people who are just starting. Along with that, you obviously have abundant resources on the internet to learn how to get started with After Effects. All of these links I'm gonna like post in the chat after we're done with the presentation. Along with this, there are many YouTube channels. I think School of Motion also has a course which only focuses on the expression system. So yeah, I mean, give that a go as well if you want. For learning P5 and JavaScript, there is this YouTube channel called The Coding Train, which is sort of a one-stop destination for learning the fundamentals of JavaScript and P5JS. And this, I mean, I have learned, I think it's fair to say I've learned almost all of, like what I know about V5, using by, following these tutorials that Daniel Shiffman posts on his YouTube, or by just the other way of learning anything is just fucking around and finding out, right? So that is another thing that has helped me. Also, try places like Code Academy, which have courses specific to any language that you want to learn as well. If you're not interested in JavaScript, if you want to learn Java or other languages, you can do that in places like Code Academy as well. I think Code Academy also has courses for P5JS, so maybe like check that out as well. And then if you wanna like just refer to, if you're just confused at places and you want to see how something works inside JavaScript or inside any other web-based language, then MDN Web Docs is a go-to place to like sort of have a understanding of how those concepts work. It also has extensive information about other web technologies like HTMLs and CSS. So yeah, give that a go as well. We have reached the end of our presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you so much for taking us through that. Let's open up the floor for questions. I think there's one already. Sai, you can go ahead.
Yeah, hi. Really cool session, Shank. So I wanted to know, I had a couple of questions actually. One of them is, how do you handle easing in, in P5 or processing? Because we have the graph editor and After Effects, and It's visually easy to understand that. But how do you handle that within code? And the next question is how, like, what do you use for the physics sort of simulation? Because I've seen a lot of your work uses like gravity or interaction. So what do you use for that?
Yeah, great questions, both of these. For easing, I think there are already, you can either write the function yourself, because most of these easing functions, uh, they have already been, figured out by people more smarter than us. And they have, like, there are places on the internet where you can just, I think there is this thing called easing cheat sheet or something like that, which has, like, these functions already available, where you can just put, like, input a value of the things that you want to be eased, and those functions sort of do the work for you. So that's how I handle easing. For the physics-based animations, I was using Matter.js along with P5, uh, and yeah, I mean, I tried, exploring that a while. It has been a while, but when I've, like, when I was doing those things, but yeah, I mean, I think I just, uh, uh, tried to do things with Matter.js, and tried connecting, like, writing types, like, things with type. I tried doing things with objects, and just, again, just, like, trying to mess with it and see, like, what is the stuff that I can create as per my own understanding. And yeah, this is, I think, this is how I do those physics things. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yep, yep. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Any further questions? If anyone has, please go ahead. Actually, in the meantime, Vishank, also thank you so much for that very detailed presentation. There was so much happening in it, and it was very cool to see that process.
Yeah, thank you.
And yeah, I think a lot of us are definitely convinced that we should start learning some more code so that we can improve our skills on in this front.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is something that I also enjoy talking a lot about,
Hmm.
because I've been doing this for a while, and I think it's about time that, after a while, you sort of, try and reach a stage where there's something that you want to do in After Effects or the other tools that we use for our work. And yeah, I mean, we just don't have that option in that tool. And for those use cases, I think it's a great, thing to learn, great skill to have in general. um,
Hmm.
and yeah, I think it was very, like, it was fun for me as well, like, interacting with the audience, and taking questions and trying to answer them. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you so much. Anyone has any questions, please go ahead. And if not, then we can. I think we can wrap up then. So just
Yeah,
go ahead. But anyone?
I think there's a question in chat.
yeah, yeah. I work at Disney Plus Hotstar. um, my regular day does not, like, involve doing code based animations, sadly, but I try to include, like, this aspect in every project that I try to do. For example, the examples that you saw, where I do rigs with After Effects. I try to do that because I work in a design team, in the product design team at Hotstar. So there are times when, most of the times, a very standardized, format is required, and using code to standardize that work is a, like, a uh, is an essential, like, thing that my day-to-day job requires. So yeah, I mean, this is what I do, and this is what I try to sort of include in all the projects that I do. Hopefully that answers the question. Yeah, if there are no other questions, I think we can wrap up.
Okay, I think we got one question, sorry, from Sai.
Any names you look up to this team? Yeah, a couple of I think one of the things that sort of like got me interested into doing more stuff with P5 is this studio called Studio Dumbar. They have been doing these things for a while, and I think I saw like some of their work back in 2018 or 19, and I've always like sort of going back to that and wondering how they would have done that. And I think it was just this curiosity which sort of pushed me to learn more about P5 and about like doing code based animations in general. So they are a great inspiration, surely. So yeah, I think that is the thing that that I am very much inspired by. Can you talk about the differences between working on motion at an agency like Animal and an in-house design team at Hotstar? Yeah, sure. Well, see, I think both of these things have like their merits and demerits. While I was like working at Animal, I had the chance to like work on like a variety of projects, and because it's an agency, you have different clients with different requirements, and you get to explore more, you get to do stuff that is that sort of has the ability to break the norm, or like to do something that hasn't been done before, or to think of something that hasn't been done before. Whereas in a product design setup, in a design team, I think more structured is required. But both of these things, I'm not downplaying one or the other, but both of these things are equally essential for you to like sort of be very good at what you do. In my opinion, Animal has taught me, the working at Animal with the brilliant team of designers and like colleagues that I had, that has taught me great ways of iteration, great things about design, that has built my understanding of design in general, of good design in general. And working at Hotstar is sort of like shaping how I structure these things, how I structure my like design flow, and how I do things which are more standardized, and how I think about standardizing motion design in general. So yeah, both of these things have their own merits and demerits, and yeah, I think that is the difference according to me. All right, I'm just gonna take a moment and mention those links on the chat.
So we have our links pasted right now on the chat. So that also includes Vishank's website, his Instagram, and also the link to join the Motion Sickness Discord server, our Instagram and our YouTube channel. This call is recorded, so it will be there, say, in about a week's time, and you can look back to it and um, yeah, check it out around then. I think till then, Vishank is just putting in the links that he had, and we'll just wrap from there. Additionally, we'll also post all the links that Vishank is currently posting on our story. So if you have to refer back to it, you can go there.
Yeah, these are all the links that I had. And yeah.
Okay, awesome. Cool. I think that's everything. Abhishek had what's the project link to join Discord? Sorry, I didn't get your question. The link to join our Discord is out here. It goes to a Google Doc where you can fill out the form. Sorry, a Google form, and you can fill that out, and then we'll get back to you post that. Yeah, cool. I think thank you so much, Vishank, for taking out the time to take us through this very detailed and very technical talk. And I think it was a really cool process to see, and very refreshing to see a non After Effects screen teaching us about animation. Yeah, thank you for taking out the time, and yeah, I think we can call it for a night now.
Yeah.
So
great, everyone. Great talking
thank you.
to everyone. Great interacting with everyone. Thank you for the session. And yeah, have a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Have a good night.